Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another rousing rendition of the BREADren podcast. That's BREADren like bread, BREADREN, because we always talking about our bread and we always getting bread. And when I say we, I'm always pleased and pleasure to introduce my brothers in this thing called life, Dr. Ajamu Loving, PhD, and Destrian Wells. How y'all gentlemen doing this evening?
Man, doing great. Glad to be back in the booth.
That's what's up. That's what's up. As usual, people, you may have noticed that we're slightly off kilter, slightly off schedule, but like we let you know in previous episodes, you know, my illustrious brothers are always jet-setting and moving around the country, giving speeches and enlightening people as they do here on this podcast while I sit home and just enjoy living life vicariously through their Instagrams and text group. But we're not going to go into that. I don't want to, you know what I'm saying, get down in blue because I ain't out here doing it like them. But
can you just start another business?
All right, let's get into this, man. Let's
right.
Yeah, we'll talk about that later. You know
right.
what I'm saying?
Use that money to wipe those tears away.
Right. Look, I'm constantly reinvesting. I got dividend reinvestment on my life program. It ain't even just for my stocks. It's on everything. As soon as they come in, they go out to something. If it ain't a bill, y'all know how life goes. Let's introduce these drinks because
thick and shut-in list.
Yeah, if that helps, come on, bring the communion by the house. Speaking of communion, Dr. Levin, what do you have in your glass this evening?
Oh well, you know, for my good friend, and he's gonna love this, Destrian, as well as old Shannon Sharp.
O'Shea Sharp.
O'Shea Sharp. Today, on today, I'm drinking Hennessy and Coke.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure we all know what DJ has. So, I mean, I might be the only one. I might be off tonight. But DJ, go ahead. What you drinking? Surprises, maybe? No?
What?
Not a chance.
All right.
Not a chance.
Got two Uncle Shays in the house tonight on the hen dog.
Oh.
Let's hope not.
I got no hair, but I'm wearing a do-rag anyway.
Oh, my God.
Trying to get them thoughts wavy. And I'm on that Johnny Walker Black. I will probably finish this bottle tonight, so we'll see what we got on the next episode. But, as always, gentlemen, glasses up. Cheers to a wonderful conversation, knowledge being dropped, and all that good.
Yeah.
All right. So in the last episode, we talked about overcoming challenges and pressure, and overcoming challenges and dealing with pressure. And not to really, carry on the conversation, but this conversation will kind of tie into it. And we'll try to make it work. But we're going to talk about breaking generational cycles. And as it's become a tradition, Doc has came up with a beautiful outline, and so we'll go over, a couple of points. The first one being recognizing the harmful generational cycles that play around and in your life, understanding how those negative bad habits can affect your destiny, structuring your life to minimize those harmful tendencies, recognizing the opportunities around despite genetic and familial nearsightedness, and creating the right team, ones who are aware of your generational cycles but want better for you and can help you get there. We may not make it to all those points, but we'll do our best. But starting with the first point, recognizing the harmful generational cycles at play around your life. And, Doc, I'm going to throw it to you first, because the question that I want to pose around that point is, how do you recognize it? Because as it says in its name, it's a generational cycle.
Yeah. So
for years, it seems as though no one has recognized it. How does someone start recognizing that?
Man, and this is honestly, I think, one of the tougher things, right? Because when we talk about a generational cycle or something that you continue to do where the family has repeated this particular pattern generation after generation, and your cousins do it, your uncles have done it, whether it's whether something as simple as always drinking way too much, or whether it's going to jail, or having athletic talent and somehow never ever being able to leverage it for your benefit. There's whole families there full of incredible athletes, and never, nobody is ever able to put together the discipline necessary to make that work for themselves, so that they can either secure an education and lift themselves in a different way, or secure a career as a professional athlete. It's one of those things that seems weird, and so I think being in touch when we've done episodes on goal setting and what it is that you want to accomplish and what your purpose is, I think being in touch with that can start to give you an idea. Once you crystallize and see what your goals are and what you're going to need to do to get there, then you can start to see some of the activities that can push you towards where you're going, and then some of the activities that can take you away from where it is that you'd like to go. And I think when you start to really look at what can take you or is likely to move you away from where you want to go, that's when you start to see the negative generational cycles that are all around you. Now, it doesn't always take all of that, but sometimes, it does require you focusing yourself on what it is that you want to accomplish in order to recognize the negative or the things that could fall away from it. Now, I want to, for the parents, for the people who have the benefit of age and wisdom and experience, this is where the elders and the ancestors can be so powerful in the lives of their children, should they choose to. And I'm not sure how many older folks that we have who are listeners, but man, I really hope that you're listening to this part of it, because I want you to start telling the truth. Okay? I want you to start telling the truth about the mistakes that you've made, and own those mistakes, especially to the next generation, the nephews, the kids, the nieces, all of the ones who are looking at you and admiring you, the good and the bad. That's the problem is, little kids look at you, and even and young people who are adults in many cases look at you just because you're around sometimes and you've made an impression on them as they were young. And so they look at the activities that you have engaged in, and they don't necessarily have a bunch of judgment about it, and that's good because they love you, right? And that love is wonderful, right? But I would encourage you to exhibit that same type of love to them and tell them when they messing up. And I think that for me, my dad is one of those people. He'll let you know, hey, man, you don't need to be getting into this or getting into that, drinking too much, hanging out late, all of those types of things. And he'll tell you why. He'll tell you how it impacted him negatively. He'll tell you how it impacted my grandfather negatively, just so that I know that these types of things are out there and can negatively impact me if I'm not vigilant about it. And so, recognizing the generational cycles that play around you is something that, hey, it can happen through introspection and you just really thinking about what it is that you want to accomplish and starting to tailor your goals and seeing what activities are helpful or not, but can also come from the people around you being that truthful influence and letting you know what bad habits have sort of stuck around with the family and how they've negatively impacted the things that that those family members that you otherwise, really admire. You'll still admire them after that, but you start to see, okay, not everything that they did was perfect. Let me be more careful about how I move and the habits I develop so that I can be more productive in what I'm trying to accomplish. That makes sense.
Oh yeah, that makes perfect sense. DJ, I want to pose to you the same question, even though Doc puts it so eloquently. How do you feel, or what do you, better yet, what do you think are some necessary steps? Because we talk about introspective analysis a lot. Looking at yourself. Your real enemy is your inner me. But what do you think are some practical steps for people to start recognizing and understanding, generational cycles within themselves and their own families? Or relationships, for that matter.
Well, I think that for most of us, we can see it clearly, but we don't want to accept it because of who it's coming from, right? So if you look at your family, it's very difficult sometimes to be honest with yourself or honest with them for that matter about what you have learned or what you've come into the knowledge of them being versus what you would like for them to be. And I think that fantasy lingers for a very long time in some cases because some things are not just bad enough to harm you right now, but like Doc said, it's those habits, those things that you're forming and developing. So I think being able to have an honest assessment of who your family is, the pros and cons associated with that, and being truthful with yourself about the potential impact that it could have on you. Now, that may sound like a lot to do, but these are things that I think even kids think about. You go to your local grocery store, or if you frequent Target or what have you, kids are really honest. And as they begin to get a bit older, they see things and they will repeat it and they will say it. When they say things like, Mom, you're ruining my life, it's not always about a toy. You know, sometimes they're saying other things and you're like, should we call Child Protective Services or what have you? That kid can clearly see what's going on. They may not be able to ascertain the true impact at the present time or at the moment, but they can clearly see it. As they get older, sometimes it's the fantasy, at least in my opinion, it's the fantasy of what they want the family to be like, and so they portray that to other people, and that's a cycle in itself. Because what happens is, even if you have someone in your life that's willing to try to give you some advice about what's going on or trying to help you break some of these cycles, so to speak, you can be in severe denial of any type of issue or problem simply because it's your family member or close friend or whatever. Being honest requires you to really take assessment of self, assessment of the people around you. And in terms of practical steps, Arthur, what I would say is one step is to diversify your life experiences. Oftentimes you fall into the same cycles because you do the same things. And you can diversify your life experiences without having to have a lot of money. Something as simple as reading and exposing yourself to culture and ideas and a diverse perspective of thought. You need to diversify your life experiences because there's probably a pretty distinctive way of thinking that's caused these generational things to be present. And so once you see and identify that, the next step is to not make those same mistakes, but instead allow the experiences of others, like Dr. Loving just talked about, allow those experiences of others to be your guide, your tool, and learn from those things instead of having to go through them, because that can greatly advance your development and your ability to be in a different place in life. People say that, you do good by doing well and you do well by doing good. And so I think just that practical understanding that you should be doing one of those things at all times is something that could protect you or put up some boundaries for you to help you understand how to maybe get out of your own way, but also, more importantly, stay out of the way of others. Because sometimes all it takes is you just to avoid being a part of that process. So again, diversify your life experiences, learn from the mistakes of others, and I would also say ask questions. Spend time with those elder statesmen in your family. Those folks are like libraries. When they pass away, those libraries burn down. And so if you're not spending time with the elder statesmen in your family, it's very hard for you to get a true sense of history of how things have developed, because they're more honest than the children. They don't care. They've earned it. So they're going to say whatever they want to say about whoever they want to say it about, and there's nothing that can be done about it. At least that's how it is in my family. So if you want to know what happened in 72 that is affecting this person in 18 or 19, ask your grandmother. She'll tell you. She's not gonna pull any punches, but it really may help you unlock some things about yourself. Another thing, final thing would be, Dr. Loving talked about having the strength to ask for help on a prior episode. go sit down and talk to somebody professional. Like I said, some people don't want to call it, therapy or counseling or whatever. If you need to, again, get some assistance in terms of a team to help protect your sanity and well-being, by all means, you should do so. So sitting down, talking to someone about the things that you see in your family that maybe you don't understand or things that you want to do differently, what's wrong with having a team of people to make sure that you're securing your success? And again, a lot of these resources are, available to you through whatever means of employment that you have. So those would be some of the steps that I would say.
Beautifully put. And, you honestly skipped up to point number 3, which was structuring your life to minimize those harmful tendencies, which you alluded to a lot of different ways to do that. Also, it's weird because 1 and 3, because we talked about recognizing those harmful cycles, but recognizing them is kind of a way of being able to structure your life, around it to avoid it and to make changes on it. Because honestly, we always talk about the first step of power was defining phenomena. The first thing you have to do is define. So, once you know what it is, now you can start making positive actions towards changing it. So, Doc, that's the point I want to throw to you next is, Destrian kind of alluded to it, but what are some solid ways of structuring your life? Because obviously we can think of the obvious ones, like if you figure out that a generational cycle is brought on by a particular person, you can set up the boundaries to, remove that person or limit interaction with that person. But beyond that, what are some self-reflective things that you can do that you think that you should do or could do to structure your life around it? I know you always talk about organizing, so let's see if we can make that play into it.
Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing is, all right, when I talk about structure, usually for me, it speaks to, all right, let's see what we can do to make things as easy as possible and step by step to avoid the bad situation, right? And so if you know that you have the tendency to not work as hard as you should, and you come from a family that is incredibly talented, but never applies itself and got a bunch of excuses and will allow you to be comfortable in your excuses, right? You have to start to, as we said, talking about number 1, you have to recognize that, right? And recognize those tendencies, and then you have to, you got to leverage that schedule book, right? You gotta put things in your calendar and have alarms going off, so you need to be doing this at this time and make it as automatic as possible to accentuate the positive, right? But then also eliminate the negative. So many people end up in negative cycles, not so much because they are malevolently pursuing some bad thing. It's just that they BS so much, right? There's nobody there in their family that talks to them about, hey, man, you've got talent, right? Or you've got an opportunity, and you need to push harder than you've watched other people who are around you push, right? You've watched people go to work, sometimes. And I'm not, because there are a lot of people who work extraordinarily hard. There are people who, who will give you a glaring example of hard work, and it never really paid off as well for them. So this is not everybody, right? This isn't, people have this whole deal where they're like, oh, well, if you're not wealthy, it's because you're not working hard, or you sleep too much. No. There are people who work extraordinarily hard and don't have a lot to show for it. But I'm talking to those individuals who know within themselves that they have the talent, right? And the people around you tell you you've got the talent, but you have a penchant for laziness. I'm talking to me too, by the way, with that. The achievements that I have in my life are despite the fact that I am a naturally lazy person. Feels good to admit that a little bit, but it's true, right? And it's funny because my dad will say the same thing, right? And then maybe that's why it makes it easier for me to admit it, right? And he makes himself do the things that he needs to do, that he knows he's going to need to do in order to be successful, right? And so when you're aware of your weaknesses, it's like in martial arts or in boxing, right? a person who's a left-handed boxer, a southpaw, they know the punches that they're more vulnerable to. They know the footwork that makes them potentially a step behind. They know where they need to place things. If they're smart, they know where they need to place themselves all the way down to the toe, all the way up to their forehead and their nose, precisely where it is that they need to be to avoid being able to get hit and also to be able to deliver punches, right? It's self-awareness. It's awareness of those weaknesses that makes you stronger, okay? And it makes it so that you can structure plans and structure strategies and then execute those strategies in ways that are likely to be more helpful for you, okay? And I don't want to gloss over that second point that we had about understanding how those negative bad habits can affect your destiny, because I think a lot of times people will overlook these things like, oh, well, you have your pluses and you have your minuses and that's it. No, man, think about how your minuses may have been extraordinarily destructive for people who are close to you, who are family members, who are in your circle, right? Don't diminish the negative things that have happened based on stuff that might seem less negatively impactful, right? There are folks who have smoked weed and become nothing. And there are people who will tell you, like, oh, well, I smoke all the time and nothing happened. And that's the point, though, is that nothing happened, right? You were a person who could have been a fabulous artist, and you chose to smoke on the couch all the time, and you never painted anything after third grade. You're a person who, could have written songs. You're a person who could have written books. You're a person who could have done so many things. And it's not like smoking weed or doing nothing killed you, right? It didn't kill you. You're still alive, but it killed who you could have been. Right? It took away what could have been if you had applied yourself in a way that was consistent with your real ability and acknowledging those negative generational habits and cycles that have been around you. If you had paid attention to those things and structured your life in a way that you say, all right, I recognize the power of, in this case, the nothing, right? The power of the nothing in comparison to what it is that I want to accomplish, and I'm going to make sure that I'm doing something, if for no other reason, to avoid the nothing. Not so much because I think some extraordinarily bad thing is going to happen to me, like, prison or, some horrible strung out type drug addiction, but because I know that nothing is potentially out there. And when I have grasped a hold to what it is that I want to accomplish, and it seems real or possible based on the fact that you've broken that goal down into attainable steps, now it's like, well, who am I cheating? Who am I doing wrong to? If I choose not to acknowledge and act accordingly and move towards where I'm going, and avoid those things that that seem a little bit more innocuous, but now that I'm really focused on what I want to accomplish, man, not innocuous at all. And so it all sort of goes together in terms of moving towards structuring your life. You got to have the reasons there, okay. I'm not saying because people will say, well, I don't have I continue to drink to the point that I'm falling on my behind every night, and I do it, and I haven't figured out why. Well, maybe you don't need to first just stop drinking. If you can't drink and not fall on your behind every night and drink to the point of passing out and almost death, then maybe first don't drink. And when BREADren, and we've talked before about, you analyzing where mama and daddy used to talk like this, and this is why. No, man, like, you need to just not drink. You know what I mean? Just slow down on that liquor, right? Because then you can put yourself in a place where now your mind is a little bit clearer, and you can start to talk to the people who are going to help you find your, these deep-seated reasons and all the rest of that. That's great. But you need to be able to think clear a lot of times to really understand why it is that you need to focus on what it is that you're doing. Sometimes your mind can be so clouded by the negative activities and cycles that you've been involved with. If you smoking weed all the time and drunk all the time, you're in a constant state of inebriation. It's very difficult to be inebriated all the time and also be focused on what it is that you could otherwise be doing. Right? I've had students. Yep, I'm about to say it. I'm calling you out. Not by name, of course, because I never do that. But I have had students in my class who were talented young people come in smelling like weed, bright red eyes, and then come to my office hours and the same day still smelling like weed, talking about, I'm right now I'm getting a D. I need a B out of this class. Dr. Lovin, what can we do? We? What do you look, man? I don't know what other professors you have and how out of touch they are, but I know what weed smells like, and I know what a person who's high looks like. And you high come to class, which means that you probably high in other times of your life, in times where you could be studying, where you could be getting better at finance, where you could be sharpening yourself as a college student and moving towards what it is that you came here for. And I know that you can do it. You're not a stupid person. You're just a high person, which is hard to distinguish sometimes when a person's very high versus them being stupid at the moment. But I know that they're not stupid people. So the thing is, all right, what are you going to do? Are you going to clear your head? You're going to put yourself in a position where you can start to pursue what it is that you want to accomplish and act like you're trying to actually do that? Or are you going to sit there and just smoke weed all day? Look, man, medicinal, whatever you want to call it. I have no problem with people drinking, obviously, as we toast at the beginning of all of the sessions that we have, or smoking, or whatever you do to enjoy yourself in your what? Recreation. But there's a difference between recreation and productivity. And if you are trying to be productive, then it's difficult to be both productive and recreational at the same time. You need to recognize where it is that you're trying to go, put down the stuff, or at least limit the stuff that you do that's not helping you be productive to the times that are your recreational times, and then give yourself the time that you deserve to pursue those goals that you can accomplish. Right? You owe that to you. And you also owe it to the world, because nobody else can deliver what it is that you can deliver. You have it. There is a purpose out there for each of us, right? And there are other folks that can do things like you do them, but there's no one who can do precisely what you have been sent to do and impact the people who you have precisely been sent here to impact but you. There's one thing that I've learned as I've tried to abdicate my responsibility for making black people more financially responsible and increasing black wealth in this country. And I've looked at other folks and, man, maybe this person can do that, and I can just be a professor and sit here on my duff and just chill and enjoy my, the fact that I got a decent salary in life. Nah, man, I got to push. I've got to push, not just for me because I feel like the destiny is in me or whatever, but because there are people out there who need to hear me. And if I don't say it, there's not going to be somebody who says it in the way that they need to hear it so that they can go where they need to go, right? That's what life is about. People helping people based on what it is that they have, despite the negative things that might be around them, trying to pull them back, pushing forward. I talked a long time. My bad.
No, it's all good, man. If I could, AJ, let me jump on that real quick.
Go ahead.
One of the overarching things that I think is happening here, when you really think about this, we're in a culture that breeds certain types of perceptions, and one of the perceptions is that, oh, you have time. You got time for that. The fact of the matter is, That's your biggest competition is time, and it's your most valuable resource. And we treat it like it's an infinite commodity, and it's not. So even as it relates to these generational things, one of the generational things that I've heard growing up, oh, you got plenty of time for that. Like it starts when you're young. You got plenty of time for girls. Just focus on the books. There's always an excuse for why there's not a need for a conversation. So instead of education being imparted, an excuse is given. And the excuse is generally, you have time. The fact of the matter is you don't have that much time. Think about how long the average person typically lives. Is not a really long time. So I was at a conference this week, and one of the gentlemen is a fantastic speaker. I can't mention his name until the conference is over, but fantastic speaker. He always brings it. And one of the things he said was, like you just said, Dr. Levin, he said, I do all right, and I have a comfortable life, my family. We have a plan. That plan is coming together. I'm not severely worried about much, and I think I'm fortunate. But he said, I'm 50 years old now, and someone asked me last week, if you could trade your time, whatever time you got left, for Warren Buffett's income, would you do it? And he said, look, the guy's worth $90 billion, and I'll never see that money in my life. But I wouldn't trade whatever time I have left for it. Sometimes we have to make things real for our kids, our relatives, our loved ones. You don't have a lot of time. And it's not to scare them, but it's to make them maximize things. So like you talked about, the laziness, the procrastination, the lack of willingness to push through. But if I told you exactly how much time you had left, how would you change your behavior? Would you make excuses about generational curses if I told you that? Would you make excuses about, generational cycles if I told you that? It's not that they're excuses. They're learned behaviors for sure. But would you break those more immediately, realizing that you don't have that much time? So I think one of the things that, at least in my family and some of my friends I've seen is, hey, you got plenty of time. Well, the fact of the matter is you do have time, but it's still up to you what you do with it. And so I think we have to get real about maximizing our time, because we all get the same amount of hours in a day. But it's amazing to me how a person with a purpose is so much more productive than a person who is just shooting the breeze. And sometimes the person that's more productive is not the more talented person, but they've had the conversation around, you need to maximize your time. Because what you have to realize is, by not learning that lesson early, you end up living life backwards. The people that learn that lesson early, they do what they need to do right now so they can do whatever they want to do later. The people that don't learn that lesson early do whatever the hell they want to do right now, and they do whatever it is they have to do for the rest of their life, not even a later, for the rest of their life. Which situation would you want? And if you want to, start to tear down those barriers to breaking down cycles, I think it starts with understanding and valuing your time. If you looked in an hourglass, it's very easy to look down and see the time that's transpired and passed and waned. But sometimes it's really hard to gauge how much time you have left. And because none of us know that, you should wake up every day trying to maximize it. You can't spend time focused on what happened to mom, like you said, or mom and dad did this and they talked like this and they did that. Acknowledge it, meet it, accept it, and now find yourself a group of people that are going to help you move beyond it. Because your time is valuable. And in order to reverse those things, we have to spend our time doing different activities than the people that came before us. So sorry to jump in on that, but that really resonated with me what Dr. Lovin was saying, and I really just, for me, it's about time and how I value my time.
No problem. Definitely no problem. Because I like it when you all go on your spills, as I call them. And Doc had a lot to say, and I just want to reiterate some points of and interject my own thoughts on it, because he mentioned, both of you all mentioned a lot about vices and recreation, and the thing that we always say is moderation and responsibility. Those two things go hand in hand. Because we definitely hit on the points of the comfort of habits, and that's one of those things that if you're comfortable in habits, whether it be your own that you developed already or ones that you saw and learned from other people, those can be the starts of generational cycles, and something that we'll get into in just a second that I'm gonna bring to you all. But the power of intervention, self-intervention, outside intervention, is truly helpful in getting some of these hard truths put on the table, and learning how to truly be honest with your situation, and understanding that time is a finite resource. But the crazy thing about it is you don't know how much you have, like DJ alluded to, because the average lifespan. But we know people that have gone way before that. We know people that have gone way beyond that. We know people that have gone right at that. So everybody's different. Everybody's situation, everybody's purpose is different. So understanding that time is a finite resource and treating it as such. Gold is a finite resource, and we see how the world treats gold. Time is more valuable than gold. Time literally is the basis of almost everything. It's all based on time. So it's priceless in a sense. And as like we said, it is a resource, but you got to understand, you got to treat it with such. And so being moderate and responsible when it comes to your recreation and your vices and things like that, because I can speak personally. What I do and when I do it, I make sure I do it responsibly, moderately, and that I have all of my ducks in a row and all of my affairs in order. And that is something that everybody's not able to do, and those of us who are not able to do that are the ones that find ourselves in what I like to call the development trap. That's not mine, but that's the point that I'm bringing up now. As I looked up the cycle of poverty, because let's be honest, a generational cycle that is quite common and well known by most and all is the generational cycle of poverty and lack of wealth, especially in the black community. But in economics, the cycle of poverty is the set of factors or events by which poverty, once started, is likely to continue unless there is outside intervention. And we got to understand, and we got to remember that cycle is something that continuously happens over and over again. So the only way you can stop a wheel from rolling down a hill is to put something in front of it. Mm-hmm. So, and what they put here is outside intervention, which that's an interesting point that I want to bring to you all, because we talked about self-intervention where you recognize things and all of that, but it's saying I'll read it again because I really want everybody to understand this. Is in economics, the cycle of poverty is the set of factors or events by which poverty, once started, is likely to continue unless there's outside intervention. So it did not say it will only it continues unless. It says it's likely to continue, which means if you do some self-intervention, you still have a chance of getting out of poverty. And we've seen it happen. There are multiple stories of people who come from zero, from nothing, literally like impoverished families, adopted, didn't even know their real families, grew up in foster homes and literally had nothing, homeless on the streets, and now have everything they could possibly want in the world. We've seen stories like that. But it also went to say the poverty cycle can be called the development trap. And I wanted to, talk with both of you all about the development trap, because in terms of progression and breaking these generational cycles, which poverty is one of the most well-known of the cycles that we can talk about, is getting stuck in that development trap, and how that development trap can also, based on the comfort of habits, can start with you. Like it said, the cycle of poverty is a set of factors or events by which poverty, once started, is likely to continue. So it can start, honestly, with you, with us. A generational cycle can start with you. It's not something, it doesn't have to be going on for hundreds of thousands of years. It could have literally started with, your parents, or can start with you. If you grow up with a perfect upbringing and have everything silver spoon in your mouth, so you have no get up and go, you have no purpose or progression. The generational cycle can start with you. But I wanted to talk to you all and throw that point to you all. And DJ, I'll throw it to you first. Let's talk a little bit about the development trap and understanding the power of intervention, and how to truly be honest with your situation, yourself, and others. Because let's be honest, if you continuously lie about a situation and you're not honest about it with yourself first, how can you ever truly be honest about it with others? And I know, each of us has probably seen an episode or two of the show Intervention that used to come on, and you see how it works. And, specifically that show is talking about, hardcore drugs and alcoholism and things like that. So, but we also know the show Hoarders. That's a habit that also requires intervention. And
right.
we don't necessarily have to talk about the extremes, because there are generational cycles that aren't extreme, that don't do a lot of affecting, but as it progresses, can progressively get worse and worse and worse and worse and worse until by the fourth or fifth generation, now it's an actual problem. But let's talk about the development trap. And DJ, I'll throw it to you first.
Yeah, man. So let's take a step back and start here, right? And indulge me for a moment. I'll make it brief. There are a lot of movies that have come out, and they show the ability to do time travel. So you can go back in time, you can change this event. Specifically, you think about the butterfly effect, right? And understanding how changing one aspect of a moment or an event can significantly change the future is what the movie, or at least in my estimation, is what the movie was trying to portray. And I think we don't understand the power that we truly possess to change what we would consider our destiny or the outcome of situations. Everything comes down to choices. So as it relates to this development trap, you have to make a decision, and you have to put time frames on things. Again, going back to time. Okay, I do need to develop myself, and I do need to develop better habits or what have you. But some people rest on their laurels because we honestly have a medical excuse for almost anything that someone does. And I'm not advocating that anyone have the same exact upbringing that I did, but there were things that I did that were not going to be medically classified. They were going to be dealt with in a very specific type of way. So I just didn't do them because I knew what would happen. And so I think, what we've done is created a culture where there's an out for you. We'll give you a way out. We'll also give you a little help getting there. And to me, that's what the development trap looks like. And one of the reasons why I think that definition says that you will likely stay there without outside intervention is because we also are participants in placing ourselves in said trap. No one's coming to get you. They're just offering you an excuse or resource or what have you. And it's comfortable, it's convenient. And why remove yourself from these comforts? Well, the reason why is because you don't grow. You're stagnant. And it may feel okay as long as things are reasonably going well. But what happens when there's a deviation from the norm? That development trap feels awfully uncomfortable, and you usually find people that are in that space. That's the tipping point for them. So that's when you see people decide that I'll just rob somebody, or I'll just, I'll shoot somebody, or I'll take this or I'll take that. They have become so accustomed of things being given to them. There's an expectation that they deserve this, right? And so that development trap to me is it's a really harmful proposition for a person that's on the cusp of trying to make significant change, because one setback can put you right back in that comfortable space, whereas I'll just take the resources that are provided to me. That's better than me getting up working every day, so on and so forth. Now, like I said earlier, making just a singular decision Like, it's similar to going back in time. You can decide that I'm going to put a time limit on this developmental phase, and I'm going to revisit it. Dr. Loving talks about it all the time, being organized, automating, and having structure. There's nothing wrong with getting help. So if you're in a developmental phase, you may say, hey, realistically, it should take me 9 months to move from point A to point B. At 3 years, maybe you're not making effort, or something is drastically wrong with the system that you're in. And I think it's also important to understand that if the definition says that it will likely take some outside influence, that means this is a systemic type of program, so to speak, that you're entering into, one that you're not likely to get out. So if you really unpack what the definition is saying, you may want to avoid those types of scenarios altogether, because by definition, you're being told once you're in, it's going to be extremely difficult for you to get out. But again, this goes back to having conversations with children, young adults, what have you, and creating a culture of responsibility. In the house that I reside in today with my wife, every New Year's we sit down and we talk about, like, and we're certainly not perfect at it, but we try to have some type of, what is the culture going to be, or the theme for the culture of this home? What is it going to be this year? If it was something you didn't like before, what do we need to change? As opposed to allowing these things to linger, affect our kid, affect us for years. Like, you got to get in front of things, and you have to create a culture of change, and you have to have a responsive nature, and not one that's passive as it relates to negativity. The way we meet some very basic things in life with such passion and energy, I really wish we would meet negativity and these traps and these cycles in the same way. That same energy, when people say keep that same energy that you have on social media for Aisha Curry as you have for these generational cycles. If we put half as much effort into that, we'd be in a much better place. Because whether you agree with her or not, those are generational type things, and you can see it in the conversations that people have, whether she should say something or she should not, if it was the appropriate time, or if it was not. You see a lot of cultural appropriation come out in these types of conversations, where it's very clear that the culture in one household was one thing and the culture in another household is another. Not that either is right or wrong, but it doesn't allow for diversity of thought. One party has to win. And I think that that's also another generational cycle that we have to break. You can tell the truth and not be right. If let's say something happens between you and I, and truthfully, maybe I did something that you didn't appreciate, but the manner in which you brought it to me could have been absolutely wrong. So you could have been telling the truth, but you could be wrong doing it at the same time. Like, just because it's true doesn't make the way you did it right. And we have a need in our culture to prove people wrong, to be right, as opposed to understanding that we can have varying opinions. And from the seat that I sit in, my points can be valid, although not relevant or truthful to you. But from the seat I sit in, I could literally be being completely honest. And that need for right or wrong separates us on so many levels and doesn't allow us to help each other break those developmental traps, because they are meant to do just that, to create division. And because you can't understand someone else's perspective or sit in the seat that they're sitting in, how can you properly support them? Especially if you feel that you're so far removed from it. So I think it's important that we do a few things. And one is, as we're trying to break these cycles or assist others, remember that we were likely once right in the midst of it, or we could be in one tomorrow. Like you said, we could be creating cycles as we speak, positive or negative, by the way. So if I'm speaking life into you and positivity, even if there's no immediate change, I should continue to do that because I want that to become your norm. So those types of activities and those types of things, to me, are how you start to combat those things, but also how you understand them and really dive into the core of what they are, and you get to the root of the issue, and that way you can carve it out, as opposed to always dealing with the surface of the problem and always glossing over it and never really peeling back the layers of the onion to deal with the underlying issue.
Yeah, and you definitely made the point, Doc. I'm going to throw it to you real quick, but you made the point of reiterating the fact that generational cycles, like we said, it can start and end with you. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's been going on. It could be something that, because of the comfort of habits, you are about to start right now, and you got to recognize it. And honestly, I think that may be the best time to reevaluate it, is because it may be easier to get out of. It's anything. Hindsight being 20/20, but foresight can also be 20/20. If you can see something coming at you, you can get out the way. But sometimes you can get caught like a deer in the headlights and be overwhelmed. But communication, throughout all of our themes and episodes and topics, communication is really key, and I don't think people really understand the power of just pure diversified communication. Like DJ said, diversity of thought. Just being able to understand that you don't always have to be right, you don't always have to compete, but based on the society and the economics that we deal with, it's an inevitable fact. But the more that you can circumvent that and communicate with people on a basic and empathic level, I think a lot of things can be avoided. Just basically being able to have a conversation with somebody, because there may be you or someone else may be struggling with a habit or something of that nature that could be very well on the way to causing a generational cycle, and they don't feel comfortable enough to communicate with anybody the problems or the issues that they're facing, and now they're stuck in that development trap, and not necessarily on their own fault. It's just it's a societal thing, like DJ said. It's systemic. It's something that's been embedded into our everyday world. And we can definitely go into a whole conversation on the power of social media and how that plays a role and all of that stuff. But Doc, what I wanted to throw to you is, because of communication being so key, the fourth point that we were trying to get to is recognizing the opportunities around you despite generational and familiar nearsightedness. But from the standpoint of being able to kind of get at it, take it head on before it starts. Let's say it's not necessarily starting with you. How can you, see through the fog that is a development trap, and some ways of, going around it? Just, in essence, becoming a better person for yourself, so that, people, you, yourself, and others are all open to communication to help you or somebody else get out of that cycle and get out of the development trap.
Yeah. So, when you're talking about systemic issues, and I think in your definition you talked about poverty, and you look at public policy that has been in place basically since right around the Reagan era, right? And you look at what's happened to the working class and to African Americans overall in terms of wages. You got folks who are highly educated, and you've got these exceptions. But I'm talking about when you talked about the likelihood of escaping certain cycles, and poverty being one of them, and how that likelihood is decreased based on the environment that you are operating in. You can see what's happened to you can see what's happened to collective bargaining. You can see what's happened to unions since the 70s. You can see how wages have stagnated, right? And you can see how people who live in a way that should, let's call it default, right? The average American life, or whatever, whether you're African American or a white person born in the Midwest or whatever it is that you that's your background, right? If you aren't a person that's intentional about your purpose and what you can do for others and how that can positively impact you, and leveraging each and every one of those opportunities to push you step by step forward to where it is that you want to go, so that you and your family can be more financially viable and successful going forward. But if you wait on the quote unquote American dream to happen for you, how disappointing it has got to be to you to watch what's out there in terms of your prospects, right? And this is, not to get too political, but here we are. This is how you get people like a Donald Trump, because he appeals to that feeling of desperation for the folks who did the default things. I went to school. I did the high school thing. I got a job. I treated people with respect. I was fair to people. I didn't do any crimes. And I can't pay my bills. I can't feed my kids. I don't have the life that I should have, at least according to the American dream, the way that it was sold to me. Right? And that right there is something that tears at your personhood, at the way that you envision yourself, and the way that you envision your country, and the way that you envision what your life ought to be. And that can be a terribly traumatic experience, right? And if we talk about African Americans, that traumatic experience has been repeated over and over, and at levels that are far more difficult to endure than the average American has had to endure. And the reason I go into that is because when they talk about outside intervention in terms of curing or somehow ending poverty, it's not necessarily, at least on a large statistical level, going to be what, the people who are listening to this podcast are willing to force themselves out of a situation despite the odds. But at some point, it's going to have to be we as a people deciding to change the odds, to switch the game up and do things differently than we have before, to give people a better opportunity than we have before. So maybe we treat corporations, which are tools and not people, as less important than people. Right? This is all Dr. Loving right here. But it's also, you can look at your Bibles and other spiritual books that talk about the importance of people versus things and idols, and you can think whatever you want to about corporations and other things that we raise up to be immortal gods in our lives. But my point is this: if you are not intentional about what it is that you want to accomplish, especially in the face of all the things that come against a person who is trying to do the right thing, and the environment that's not necessarily set up for you to succeed, then your reality and the life that you lead is going to continue to be compressed and compromised in all sorts of directions going forward, because you aren't expressing and pushing outward on what you want your reality to be. You're just allowing what's out there to compress and push in on you. And what happens when people experience such extreme pressure is when you can either just collapse, or some people explode, Some people do all sorts of things that everybody says, well, how could this happen? Why would he rob this person? Why would she do this type of thing? It's just a reaction to what is the seemingly insurmountable set of circumstances around you, right? And I'm not saying it's 100% always going to be defeated by the power of positive thinking. That would be a naive, foolish thing, I think, for me to say. I don't know everything, but I know too much to think that that's the case, right? But what I do know is you're far more likely to be successful if you recognize those negative things around you and you address them. You do the things that you do, recognizing where it is that you can go, and push yourself as hard as you can, despite the fact that this isn't fair, and it ain't going to be fair. I would like for it to be fair, and I will always vote for the people who say that they're going to do the things to make it closer to fair, but I'm never going to bank on life being fair in terms of eking out a fair share for me and my family. I know that I have to push in certain types of ways to make certain types of things happen so I can get the results for my family, so I can get the results for the people who I want to see be successful, so that black folks and other marginalized minorities and gays and other folks can get ahead. I know that's going to take some intentional pushing, and I'm willing to push because I know what the default is, right? And so when you're aware of those things, and you start to see some of the more trivial generational cycle things that could get in the way of it, now you start to treat those things much more seriously than you might otherwise treat them, right? That sitting down and doing nothing starts to become a lot more important when you recognize the stakes, right? That time when you felt like you could just chill is over. I watch a lot of older movies. I watch a lot of I watch The Great Debaters with Denzel. Man, that guy can act, right? And I'll watch any PBS documentary on race reconstruction period and Jim Crow in the United States. I love that type of stuff. And what it makes me do is think more seriously about what it is that's my calling, and how the constraints and difficulties that I face are nothing compared to what was faced in the past, right? And that makes me more encouraged to push out there and show people how they can shape the world going forward, despite the negativity that's out there, despite the shortcomings, despite the fact that it's not fair. And also importantly, with that recognition that it isn't fair, fueling you to burn away some of those things that are trifling, that are not going to be helpful, because you can't afford that drag. You can't afford it. You know, as people who are marginalized, who are pushed in a position where they are either thought of as less than or treated less than, you can't afford to allow that to affect your behavior, because the stakes are going to be higher and far more negative for you, and you're not going to be able to do what you ought to be able to do. And I think that's a tragedy as any time a person, because that's the special thing. We talked about time before, but time, that's the currency of people, right? We only have a certain amount of that time, right? And so when we talk about people being more important than things, what do people spend? They spend time. My granddaddy always used to say, hey, yeah, folks say they got time, but you better realize that time got you. That right there is from Jonathan Calhoun Rackard right there, okay? And you better recognize that even though you do have time in certain ways, time has you, and your time is limited, just like Destrian said, okay? So you better do what you can with what you got in terms of resources, time, effort, and all of those things, and recognize the things that are taken away from it. Again, I talked too long. Sorry.
No, man, you just reminding everybody to control the controllables and observe the variables. But we coming up on time because like we said, we think we got time, but time got us. But DJ, I'm gonna throw it to you to make your closing remarks. Then Dr. Lovett, I'm gonna throw it back to you to wrap it up on your end too, and then I'll close it out. Just to inform, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to forego the after show at this present time. Don't be so disappointed because we have something in store for you. But we'll let you know about that. But DJ, go ahead, man.
Yeah, so based on what Dr. Lovin said, I'll kind of wrap my comments around some of the things he said, and hopefully it won't be too controversial, especially since we're not doing the after show. We might end up doing it. For those of you who are listening, look, regardless of race, color, creed, sex, ethnicity, I would hope that these conversations at least offer, at a basic level, some insight, or would provide stimulating conversation for you to then have with your constituents and otherwise. If you have not seen this, I would highly suggest checking out the PBS special called Boss, the Black Business Experience. Similar to what Yes, so it's the PBS special Boss, the Black Business Experience. And similar to what Dr. Loving was saying, you know, I often watch these documentaries. This one was a great one. Another one that I've watched is the Men Who, I think it's called The Men Who Created America, or The Men Who Ruled America, whatever. It was on the History Channel. It's about J.P. Morgan. You know, we talked about him, and we talked about Tesla and all these folks, and how their ideas and how they monopolize things. But specifically as it relates to Boss, the Black Business Experience, when you talk about a segment of society, a group of folks who had every excuse to blame generational cycles, curses, whatever you want to call them, this group was primed. We're gonna free you from slavery, and go get them. Just go get them, okay? So without being armed with the proper resources or techniques or tools, and keep in mind at this point banks are now starting to move towards credit. So these folks are being marginalized basically to have the very land that they've just bought themselves free with taken from them, and ultimately end right back up in servitude. So if there was ever a group of folks that could use this generational thing, it would be them. But they didn't. This is the same group that birthed Madam C.J. Walker. This is the same group that birthed a Black Wall Street in Greenwood or Greenville, Oklahoma. We have the same connectivity to those thoughts, that energy, and those ideals to break generational cycles right now. I'm a firm believer in the following statement, but a lot of my friends disagree with me or whatever. I don't think that more than one or two generations of your family has to be poor and struggle. I just don't think that they have to. The reason being, you should insure yourself. At a very basic level, if you insure yourself, especially as we talked about poverty being one of the key aspects of generational cycles in the African American community, if we would just insure ourselves, combine that insurance with education around personal finance, budgeting, importance of credit, and developing some decent habits, your family is in a much better situation when the known happens. At some point, our time is up. I don't think it's a selfish behavior. I think it is a generational behavior that many of us don't properly insure. Because I've heard many people say, I got enough to put me away. Well, what do you have to set the next generation of your family up? Many of the families that are the well-to-do in this country have had pass-throughs based on the way insurance is taxed, or you can do some estate planning or what have you. we have to start being serious about properly insuring ourselves, because if you don't have the type of job that's going to lead to financial freedom, you can most certainly have the type of insurance that would for your family. And if you've given them the proper tools and you've helped them understand the importance of it, you can transition wealth instead of debt when something happens to you. So I just wanted to make those comments as it related to what I think that we would probably agree is one of the larger generational cycles that needs to be broken in our community. The other, I just think, is communication. Open, honest communication, like Dr. Loving said, about mistakes and the opportunities to learn from them. We can give our kids a head start and also maybe save them a lot of money in counseling if we would sit down and have an honest conversation with them. And we may actually improve their relationship dynamics or their ability to be suitable partners for someone in the future. So, look, guys, I appreciate you being up late doing this tonight. I really wanted to cover this topic, so I thank you guys for giving me some time and attention.
No, most definitely. Go ahead, Doc.
I was going to say, for the listeners, we went back and forth on topics, and BREADren fought for it. Normally, he just introduces the topics, and then we kind of just got to talk back and forth about what we want to do. He came back forcefully like, no, we need to do this. And now, you know what? I'm glad you came back with a little bit of force and said, we need to do this. And I agree with you, because I think this has been a good, especially as we've taken a little bit of break based on the schedules that we've had. It really hasn't been a long break, but still, though, I'm glad we did this. Right? It makes me. It was cathartic to get some of that off my chest. I'm gonna be honest, right? There is a lot of what I like to call austerity gospel out there, right? Austerity gospel. If you will only just not spend, then you can take your way out of poverty, and it's the fact that you have Jordans on your feet is the thing that's keeping you from your destiny and all the rest of this. Just don't have nothing, and then you're gonna have so much because you'll invest all of your money and be great. And I think that's as false as false can get. What I will tell you is that you can start to do positive things that are going to pay dividends over time, and you can start to build up slowly despite having a very little, right? The whole faith of a mustard seed a deal in the Bible is all built on you planting soil and planting that mustard seed in soil and being able to put a decent amount of water on it and growing and cultivating something, a small thing over time that grows to be a big thing, right? And so all we want for you to do is start to recognize how you can change those small things. You ain't got to change it all at once. We change one small thing, we start to recognize each of those things. We start to come into understanding of what it is that we want to accomplish, and then when we crystallize those things into goals, we start to think about the concrete steps to get there, and it might be a long walk. Hey, that's how life is, but let's start moving towards where we want to go, despite all of the other, all of the obstacles that are, I'm not going to say likely to happen. They're going to happen. There will be obstacles. There will be problems, right? There will be generational issues that you've had because a lot of things that you do, the learned behavior you have is based on the behaviors of other people who have been unsuccessful at some of the things that are supposed to come up out of your lineage. But I'm telling you that you can overcome it just by moving step by step. And if you don't get all the way there, you've pushed the ball further so that the next generation can move farther in the right direction, because you've addressed these things and you're going to be addressing those things actively in your children so that they take advantage of the things that you didn't take advantage of. and recognize the pitfalls that you didn't recognize. You're going to be that positive influence on them. I'm optimistic about this thing. That is why I do what I do, because I know that people have a desire deep within them to push forward and be better and make this life a much improved one for themselves going forward and for the people around them and for generations going forward. I believe this with inside of me. I think about most things, but that's a belief, all right? And so for me, I will fight for that, for you, for me, for us going forward. I am honored to be a part of this podcast where we talk about the practical steps that we need to take to crystallize and bring into form those diffuse dreams and thoughts and wants and passions that we have out there, and start to pull those things down and make them a reality despite the difficulties and despite the opposition that comes. I know we can, right? And so we will move from can and work together to do the do. And thanks for doing the do with me and BREADren and Arthur. And man, I love you, gentlemen. I had to say it today. I do. I love talking to you. I love talking with you. I love the fact that we're getting feedback from listeners. I love it when you talk to us about how you are using these things to positively impact your life and shape interaction between you and the people around you, and push towards a better future for you, your families, and the folks that you love. It makes me happy. All right, so please continue to share with us. The Facebook page, that's what it's there for. We are desperately waiting to hear all of the wonderful positive feedback that you have, and some of the constructive feedback that you have too, things that you think that we can do better. We need to hear that too. That's what love is about. Love ain't just about patting us on the head and telling us how great we are. Tell us about how we can improve, because if we work on improving and we're better at that, then we can help you be better, and we can both help each other be better. Hey, that's what it's all about. So thank you, and that's all I have to say, AJ.
Beautifully put. As I pull the last bit of the Johnny Walker Black, we've gone a little bit over our normal time, and that is purposeful because this topic is vast and massive, and we know that, which is why I am going to go ahead and claim that the next episode, because like I said, we're going to forego the after show tonight, but the very next episode, which will probably drop sooner than later, we're going to just go ahead and dive into the topic of creating and sustaining generational wealth. If the two gentlemen will agree, which I'm pretty sure they will, we're just going to go ahead and do it because that deserves this time, because we ought to go ahead and basically just lean into that conversation and continue that conversation since we're breaking the generational cycles, let's go ahead and talk about creating generational wealth, because it is a huge topic. And I like the way you talked about the austere gospel that you talked about, because a lot of people are eating that gospel up, and it's putting people into yet another situation where it can become another generational cycle where you get caught up in, for lack of a better word, scams. And not to say that everything out there get rich quick and those things. We've seen them. It's been around since the dawn of time. Get rich quick schemes. Quick money ain't worth it. Fast money ain't worth it. And that's one of the lessons that my father, my grandfathers have all taught me. So generationally, somebody may have got by it, and they made sure that nobody else got, and so the message was constantly passed down. And that's why communication is key. Communication is the one thing that can truly get you out of a cycle. Just because if it happens to me, if I simply tell you this is what happened, whether you take it or leave it, I've told you, now you can mention it to somebody else. It may not get you out, but the person you share my story to, now it can stop them, and that way it can break their cycle, and it breaks mine. Communication is paramount. So just remember the fact that humans, we are naturally progressive, man. Stagnation is not in our nature, so we have to progress. So when you get stuck in that development trap, don't get down on yourself and feel like you are stuck there. The generational cycles can start and end with you. You recognize things you can get out of it. Hindsight is 20/20, and foresight is 20/20. You can see things, take it on, control the controllables, and observe the variables. Moderation and responsibility with all things. Be truly honest with your situation. and understand the power of intervention. It can start and end with you. Natural progression. Don't get caught up in the comfort of habits. So, gentlemen, as always, it has been a vast pleasure of doing this with you all. And, you know, I think this topic and the next, which we deem is going to be creating generational wealth, is where you all are really going to shine. Because, ladies and gentlemen, this is what Dr. Lovin and BREADren do for a living. They go around, and this is why they're at conferences and they're doing speaking engagements, because this is the exact subject that they're talking about. And so it's something that they're passionate about, and I'm also passionate about, and we want to see change. So we are being that change. We're communicating to help someone, if not just ourselves, get out of cycles. And that's what this whole podcast series has really been about. And I think we've discovered it in a sense tonight. We say there was no theme, there's no real outline, but I think this is really the true purpose of this podcast, is to help people break these generational curses, generational cycles, and create generational wealth. And in the term wealth, we don't intend for everybody to be a millionaire. We don't intend for everybody to be 100,000 Whatever you feel is comfortable, understanding that your life has purpose and stepping into your purpose and being great at it, because that's what's going to bring you true wealth and true happiness. You can have $1 million and still be miserable as hell. You can be in a 30-room mansion and still be miserable as hell. You can be driving 3 Bentleys every day of the week and you still be miserable as hell. But you can have a nice, comfortable living where all your bills are paid, with spouse and children, and have a good paying job and got money put away. You're insured and you're happy and you're truly wealthy, and you're better off than the person who seemingly has it all. So just remember those things. Perspective is always key. But addendum to all the previous episodes, Destrian Wells decided to let me know just recently that I've been telling the wrong web address. It's not DestrianWellsConsulting.com, but I'm pretty sure you can type that in and it'll come up in Google. But it's actually DWellsConsulting.com. That's the letter D, WELLS Consulting.com, if you want to find him at his web domain. Yeah. You can also find Dr. Ajamu Loving, PhD, at ajamuloving.com. And you can find myself at mmbbgw.com. And like Dr. Loving said and announced, the BREADren podcast series, because that's what we are officially naming it now, has an official Facebook page. It can be found at facebook.com/BREADren podcast series. You can type that in the search box, it comes up. And also don't forget to follow us on Instagram at BREADrenPod. That's BREADrenPod. And another announcement, we're making progress, because that's what we said we was going to do. We can now be found. We've already found on Anchor, iTunes, and Google. We can now be found on Spotify. Search BREADren Podcast, and we will come up. So now you've got 4 different mediums to find us and listen to us. We appreciate you listening to us on any medium that you find us, and we appreciate your interaction and your feedback as usual. But this has been yet another rousing episode of the BREADren Podcast. I'll take this last drink of whiskey for the love and the respect of the topic and my gentlemen on the call.
All right.
As we forego the after show, because, like I said, we will come right back at you all with the second part of this conversation, which will be creating and sustaining generational wealth. So y'all stay tuned to that. Make sure to reach out to us and communicate with us, because we are an open communication forum. You talk to us, we'll talk to you. Catch us in the Facebook, on the Instagram. We love you all, and we appreciate your support and your listens. Good night.